So for homework, we were to look at the process of creating our own altcoin, our own cryptocurrency. We want to get that done before the end of the semester, and we're running out of time. So we might pause this voting thing just for a second, then maybe use our currency to bring that all together. But whatever, we'll see what happens. So focusing specifically in your papers, you may have talked about other cryptocurrencies as the base, which is fine. But focusing specifically on Bitcoin, what does it mean to fork Bitcoin? What's that mean? Well, for those of you who are in the operating systems class, what is fork? What is the fork system called? Creates a child process, right? A duplicate process that then continues on potentially a different path. So the term fork, as it relates to software, creates a duplicate repository, typically on GitHub, which starts as an identical copy and then evolves on its own from there. Okay, so that's what a fork would be in general. So the Bitcoin source code is public source, is open source, right? We can go and get the Bitcoin source code. If we jump over to GitHub, I pulled it up on here. There's a project on here called Bitcoin, so bitcoin.org. And inside here, we have the entire project that's part of Bitcoin. And specifically in this folder called source, we have a whole bunch of source code that goes into making Bitcoin work. Okay? And each of these folders has more source code inside of it. So, big deal. And here's a whole folder for JSON stuff. All right. Now, so kind of back to here. What does it mean to fork Bitcoin? It means taking that project and copying it and adding to it or modifying it. Now, if you remember, Bitcoin is a SHA-256 based algorithm. Okay? So if we want to create a copy of Bitcoin and model our cryptocurrency after Bitcoin, what are we going to have to do? What would make our currency different than the Bitcoin currency? What are the moving parts of Bitcoin? So think about Bitcoin as the base currency. What do we like about Bitcoin and what do we dislike about Bitcoin? So we can say, okay, well, we like the security, we like the blockchain, all that stuff we like. Okay, the security side of it. But what things might we not like? Go ahead.
Maximum number of Bitcoins.
Okay. Okay, so maximum number of Bitcoins, which gets driven by how many Bitcoins are created each block time. Okay, so things we might want to change: number of coins created at each block. Okay, what else? So instead of it being, remember how Bitcoin works, it started off as 50 coins were the reward. And then every 2.5 years or so, it halves. So now we're at 25, then it'll go to 12.5, and so on and so forth. So we can decide, instead of ours starting at 50, maybe ours starts at 200 or 1,000,000, whatever we decide is appropriate. Go ahead.
I would say that 10 minutes can be a long time for your transaction to get validated.
Okay, so time for a block can be modified as well. Bitcoin tries to adhere to a 10-minute time period, right? And then the difficulty adjusts based on how close the mining power has adhered to that 10-minute on average time. So that could be another thing we might want to modify. Instead of it being 10 minutes, maybe we say it's 1 minute. Maybe we say it's 30 seconds. Why do you think Bitcoin originally decided on 10 minutes? What's good about 10 minutes? Thinking about all the stuff that happens with the blockchain. Well, let's look at this from a proof perspective, induction. So what would happen if we had a 1 minute blockchain, or block time? So our goal was to keep the amount of time that it took to have one block solved at 1 minute. What does that mean?
All the Bitcoins will be mined really fast.
Oh, at the current mining power, sure. So we can make the difficulty really hard. So imagine Bitcoin though day one when there wasn't people mining it. When there wasn't a big group of people mining Bitcoin on day one, like there won't be for our currency day one. We don't have to have it very difficult to adhere to the 1 minute thing. And then we adjust the time as we go. Now, having said that, and maybe this is where you were going with it, if our coin is based on SHA-256, well, SHA-256 equipment is pretty fast already. So even a mediocre piece of equipment might be able to mine a lot of our coins very quickly if the difficulty isn't high enough to begin with. So what we might want to do is we might want to err on the side of being too difficult and then scale it down from there based on the number of people who are currently mining it. So we don't have all the coins mined at once. But outside of that, if we had a 1 minute block time instead of a 10-minute block time, what's the purpose of a block time? What are we trying to accomplish every 10 minutes? Or in this new example, every 1 minute? What's the job? We want to have something happen every 10 minutes, or in this case, we want to have something happen every 1 minute. What is that something?
Validation of the transaction.
Okay, and what does that mean? What does it mean to validate the transaction or validate the block? How is a block validated? How does that proof of work thing work? We come up with hashes, right? They're guesses. And somewhere in there, this thing is defended by an answer. And eventually we guess the right answer. And that's when the block is generated and added to the blockchain. Well, if we want to have a guess happen every 1 minute instead of every 10 minutes, what are the advantages of that and what are the disadvantages of that? To have it happen every 1 minute, we will certainly have to have a reduction in the complexity, even if we just think about Bitcoin. So don't think about our new currency. Current Bitcoin, we decide, okay, instead of a 10-minute block, we're going to have a 1 minute block. Well, at the current difficulty, current network difficulty, we're dealing with 10-minute blocks. So we'd have to basically cut the, we have to cut the difficulty down by 90%, right? To get it in the realm of 1 minute blocks. So now the difficulty is less. Does that make it less secure?
I would imagine so.
Okay, well, I guess the follow-up would be in what way? So Bitcoin, the difficulty of the network just prevents us from guessing too quickly. And if you guess too quickly, then you're rewarded with Bitcoin. So the harder it is to guess, what happens? Involved in this is the 51% problem as well. We can't have one person with more than 51% of the power. They'll win too often. But at the same time, why did they pick 10 minutes instead of 1 minute or 5 seconds? If you send somebody money with Bitcoin, it's going to take up to 10 minutes for it to show up. Well, that doesn't seem right, does it? Because 10 minutes is a long time, isn't it? When you swipe a credit card, if I were to pay Amish with a credit card, which would be ironic, if I were to pay Amish with a credit card, how long would it take for that money to hit your bank account? Usually about a couple of days before it actually will hit your account, before you'll actually have spendable money from that. A transaction is validated very quickly. It's validated in less than 10 minutes, right? You swipe the card in 10 seconds, you got a receipt printing out, approved. So it's been validated, but money's not spendable. Bitcoin, money's spendable in 10 minutes. You got your payment, it's been validated and the money's there. So that seems like an upgrade. Although human beings are greedy. We like everything to be instantaneous. Why do you think Bitcoin chose 10 minutes? The difficulty of the network was not as high as it is now when Bitcoin first came out. It was still 10 minutes then. Okay, so they wanted to have blocks happen every single 10 minutes. What's the advantage of having 10 minutes as opposed to 1 minute? What happens every 10 minutes? A block is validated and what happens? Blockchain grows. It gets added to the blockchain. Okay? Now, are only the transactions added to the blockchain? Or is there some additional fluff describing the current block with a bunch of hash values and stuff like that that also get added to the blockchain? More than just transactions, correct? So if we took all the transactions that happened within a 10-minute period and then we wrap it in a nice little box that has the couple of extra pieces of information and add that to the blockchain, that's a smaller addition to the blockchain than if every single 1 minute we took all the transactions that happened that 1 minute, wrapped it in that same box, put it in the blockchain. The next minute, all the transactions wrapped it in the box again. So however big that box is, having it happen every 10 minutes instead of every 1 minute means that we're adding whatever the size of the box is, well, if it was going to happen every 1 minute, whatever the size of the box is times 10 minus 1, 1 times the size of the box, extra data to the blockchain. So the blockchain will grow more quickly. Okay, is that a problem? I mean, we can argue right now the blockchain's too big, right? So maybe we want to have it every hour, every 2 days. We certainly have less data on the blockchain, but the blockchain, most of our data in there is transactions, and then we have some additional fluff. But certainly we can see that that decision between 10 minutes and 1 minute wasn't all just an arbitrary choice. And the other reason you think they might choose 10 minutes over 1 minute? Now, first of all, you're right in that we can choose a different amount of time. Because the goal here, or the benefit of a shorter block time is that we will have spendable money more quickly. I mean, that's true. Fine, 10 minutes is a lot faster than the 2 days with a credit card. But since everybody uses credit, essentially you have spendable money instantly, right? If you know you're going to get $3,000, you can spend $3,000 on credit, and it'll show up in 2 days, which is very likely going to be before your credit card bill is due. So you're swiping money that isn't actually there, but it might as well be. That type of thing. So if every 1 minute we were doing this, as maybe an extreme example, and we get our money in spendable every 1 minute, that's an advantage over getting it spendable every 10 minutes. So we can see that as a positive. Any other negatives? Will a block that is, when we talk about difficulty, so network difficulty has to do with the number of unique hashes, right? You know, if we're picking a needle out of a haystack, and a smaller difficulty would be a smaller haystack, right? Higher difficulty would be a larger haystack, big pile of hay. So if we have a smaller haystack to find the needle in, you're going to find the needle more quickly, likely, than you would in a larger haystack. Hopefully 10 times more quickly for the 1 minute thing. Does that have any impact on the people who are searching for the needle? Are the people who usually win going to win less often? Are the people who usually don't win going to win more often? Will it have any impact like that? Probably not. So from a fairness perspective, you know, especially considering it's starting from scratch, from a fairness perspective, same number of people will probably win just as often, right? Are these two values related? It's the number of coins that are rewarded each block time related to the block time. Right now with Bitcoin, we're rewarding 25 Bitcoins every block time. Well, if we rewarded 25 Bitcoins every block time, but block time was 1 minute instead of 10 minutes, we're going to be introducing coins into the network 10 times faster. So we'd probably have to reduce the reward to a tenth, 2.5 coins per block. Make sense? So these guys are certainly related. So there's got to be that balance. So kind of figuring out what the economy is, what the size of the currency at any point in time is in the world. Market capitalization might be what you would call that. And then work backwards from there to find that correct balance between number of coins you want to reward and block time. So what drives block time? Well, it depends on what you think the coins are going to be worth. Buying power. So if you single-handedly got 25 Bitcoins, so 25 times, what are we at? About 375? Are we up or down today?
That's about what I was.
You know, it was down a little bit, then it came back up. Let's see where we're at. I'm sure I guessed it perfectly. 368. It's down 2% today. Did open at 375.72, so we'll just assume I'm right. 72. 9,400 bucks. So if every 10 minutes you could make $9,400, would you be happy with that? That's if you win 100% of the time. We'd be able to work with that? That's only every 10 minutes, so that's, what, times 6? That's an hourly wage. 56 grand an hour times 24 hours, because I mean, these are the machines doing it for us, right? So 1.3 million a day times 365, $493 million. Now, what's funny is that seems obscene, right? There's plenty of people in the world that make more than that in a year. Isn't that ridiculous? Wow. What would you do with it? Who could spend? And do what with it?
Go out on it.
You're like a hillbilly. You just go fishing.
Well, buy it.
You have a really nice fishing rod?
No, you'd have this giant yacht, and then just like
Get it made out of gold.
like a stick with some string as his fishing pole.
Yeah, actually, any of you in here fishermen? Typically, are you so? I used to fish when I was in high school. I haven't in years, but I kind of want to get back into it. But it isn't kind of the thing like the real fishermen you do like fly fishing, so they actually can fight the fish. Where when you start putting in like this crazy high power line in your fishing rods, where you can just drag the fish. It doesn't matter what's on the other end of the line, you're catching it. Especially since you have a hook that goes through its body 9 times. So a purist would just stand in the middle of a lake with a stick trying to catch the fish. You know, it's the equivalent to my reality show about, you know, Serengeti with a lion, and then a person just covered in monkey blood. Go. I watched a documentary on that the other day, actually. In the Roman Colosseum, they used to do that. That was one of the ways that they would like kill people. One of the games, they would put lions out there with people. And what happened is, it was more often than not the lions didn't attack the people because they were scared by all the Colosseum noise. So then they would come out and they would kill the lion keeper. So it wasn't a total loss. That's what I'm saying. So, in any case, we have to decide what the buying power is of our coin, what it's initially going to be, what our block time is, so that people can, assuming this is going to be distributed amongst the community, you don't assume that one person is going to get all 25 coins. As it matures, you know, you really have to assume minimal buying power at first, right? Otherwise, you overvalue your coins, and then you decide, okay, well, we're only going to have, you know, a coin's going to be worth $300 day one, let's just say. Unlikely, but let's just say that's the case. If you're going to say it's worth $300 day one, you're probably going to have it produce less than 25 coins per block time, especially if you have a 1 minute block time. Well, in the end, you might not have enough coins in circulation for people to do anything. You don't have an economy at that point. Might be better off with the digital currency at least, and this seems to be the direction a lot of our the copycats did. The people who have forked the Bitcoin source, they want to have more coins in circulation where each coin is worth less, because since it's a digital thing, you're not having to carry around. You know, to buy a candy bar, you don't have to carry around $4 million, right? If a candy bar was $4 million, if money was, you know, there was a lot more of it. Now it's not a physical thing, so it's less of a problem. So most of the altcoins err on the side of having more coins where each coin is worth less. A good example is Doji Coin. A couple of you in here said you've done some stuff with Bitcoin. Anybody in here done anything with any of the altcoins? Okay. Doji?
Yeah.
Okay. How many Dojis do you have?
Actually, I created a site with my friend. It's like a lot of money. There's a lot.
Yeah. So like I have, let's see how many Doji coins I have right now. I bought a bunch of Doji coins. Doji coins were actually originally made as a joke. This little dog-looking dude is kind of the mascot, and it's a script-based. It's not a fork of Bitcoin. It's a fork of the Litecoin, which is script. This is loading. In theory, I think I have like 200,000 or 300,000 Doji coins, something like that. And that's worth like $40 right now. But we're hoping they go up to $1 per Doji coin. Then it'll be worth more than $40. So that's kind of, I'll see if that, oh, here it loaded. I have 257,800 Doji coins, currently worth $60.12. I rounded up. It's 11.8 cents. So in any case, that would be an example of a currency where there's a lot more Doji coins. I think Doji coins is a 1 minute block time, and there's a lot more released each block. I don't know what the number is. Might be like 1,000 or 10,000, something like that. Okay, so these numbers, these are two variables that we could mess around with. Number of coins rewarded initially. Keep in mind, if we are forking the Bitcoin source code, though, every fixed number of blocks, that number halves. Okay? So something else we might want to control is, when does the reward halve? Is that the right way of saying it? Yeah. When does the reward halve? There'll be a fixed number of blocks. All the math in Bitcoin is done in terms of number of blocks. Go ahead.
Can you make it so that there is no half, so that it's just always enough?
You can. Probably the simplest way to do that would, and we're going to look at this. We might not get into it today, but we're going to actually start looking through the Bitcoin source code, which is in C++. One thing we're going to see, it's extremely complex. So you really want to minimize the number of things you touch in the source code to make your changes. Otherwise, you're going to probably introduce bugs into your cryptocurrency. Now, that doesn't mean don't change stuff. It just means accept the fact that you're going to have to become an expert in the Bitcoin source code before you can release your currency. So having said that, if we're trying to have that accomplished, where it never halves, probably the path of least resistance to do that is make the number of blocks a ridiculously huge number before it halves. More blocks than would ever be produced, something like that. So if you're controlling number of blocks as a long, let's just say it's a long primitive type, make it that 9 quadrillion number. Hopefully you don't reach that number of blocks. Otherwise, if it halves, it halves. It's kind of the punchline. That would probably be the path of least resistance. Alternatively, there's probably also an if statement somewhere where it just checks after a block is generated if this block is evenly divisible by block count to have, then have the reward. Comment out the if statement, something like that as well. So those are some things you could do, but certainly you could make it work that way. But the less you have to modify the code, probably the better if you want to create a cryptocurrency quickly. All right, so number of block coins created. When does the reward have? Time for a block. What else? What other variables that we could change in our own cryptocurrency? Because really, what's the difference between Bitcoin and I'll take another SHA-256 coin, and it'll be PotCoin. So there's an alt currency called PotCoin. I think PotCoin actually is script. So that's a bad example. If we're going to do that, might as well have said Litecoin. Script and alternative technology to SHA-256. I think NumCoin is SHA-256. Use that as an example. So another SHA-256 currency is a coin called NumCoin or NumCoin, something like that. What's really the difference between Bitcoin and NumCoin if they're both SHA-256? Why did they come up with, it's not NumCoin, it's NameCoin. Why did they come up with NameCoin? The reason I kind of selected, even though I got the name wrong initially, is NameCoin is often mined at the same time as Bitcoin at a lot of mining pools. It can be mined efficiently simultaneously next to Bitcoin using the idle cycles because it's a much less difficult network. But why did the people who came up with NameCoin come up with NameCoin? People are still coming out with alt currencies, altcoins today, when Bitcoin's already popular. Chances are nobody's going to take over Bitcoin anytime soon. Realistically, either Bitcoin will become the winner or the idea of cryptocurrencies will die off or come back in kind of a new format where it'll just have to build up from scratch. Okay, you probably won't have a SHA-256 based coin take over Bitcoin. You would have an alternative technology. So why did they come up with NameCoin? This kind of relates to what we've been talking about with the voting stuff. Any of you familiar with NameCoin? I have some of those too. How many NameCoins do I have? I have 7.179 NameCoins. It's worth $6.37. Sick. That's lunch. And the cab. As long as I have to tip. So, NameCoins, those are automatically being mined at the same time as my Bitcoins are being mined at in my cloud mining. Why was it created? Specific purpose. NameCoins are used to purchase .io domain names. So if you want to have, like, for instance, ghash.io or cex.io, that's the the website for it. That .io domain, extension, is only purchasable through NameCoins. So somebody specifically created a coin that had a built-in economy for buying very specific things. Make sense? Just like you play video games, most of your video games have some sort of in-game currency. And that currency in the new crappy games is when your in-game currency is US dollars. That's the pay-to-win thing, right? I hate that. Who even thought of that? Had to be an American. Capitalism at work, right?
People who want money.
That's it. I mean, none of us want money, well, except Abe wants a boat. Yeah, but so most of our video games have some sort of in-game currency that's specifically for buying things related to that game. That's where its value is. So if you're interested in game stuff, you'd be interested in that currency. All right? Now, we don't like a world in general where you have to carry a zillion different currencies around. Right? In the United States, we like US dollars because it's convenient. We use them through credit cards and crap like that. But the idea is if we go into the grocery store, we don't want to have to use a different type of money than if we are going to the restaurant or we're going to the gas station. We want that to all be the same kind of money. Correct? Realistically, you can have a single credit card that, depending on where you go, it chooses the currency. If I am overseas and I swipe my MasterCard, it'll charge in euros or something like that. And my credit card company handles the mapping and all that stuff. But the idea is that we like to have a single currency so we understand it. Something costs $50, it costs $50. We don't have to convert that to rubles or something like that. So this idea of having a whole bunch of alt currencies doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. So what's the motivation? NameCoin created it for creating .io domains, but why not price those in terms of Bitcoin? Buy .io domains in Bitcoin instead of NameCoin. What's the purpose? Well, we can say they probably aren't going to take over Bitcoin, but generally speaking, is there at least a percentage of the people who are creating these altcoins that think they will be able to take over Bitcoin? Or at least disrupt Bitcoin? Kind of the scary thing becomes the disruption aspect of it. And this is related to the voting issue we were talking about before. When you watch presidential elections and stuff like that, you have your two big parties, right? The Democrats and the Republicans. And are we pretty confident that one of those two parties will be our next president? Even though there's 4 or 5 other parties on the ticket. We have the Communist Party. I think they usually have a presidential candidate. And, we have some other parties, but they don't become president. But a couple of them are big enough where they can disrupt the election. They can cause one of the top parties to not win because they take enough of the votes away from them. So it's possible that some of these altcoins have the purpose of supplanting some of the popularity of the main coins like Bitcoin, maybe towards something else. Some of these altcoins have good conversion rates to other coins. So when people have less mining power, one way to, even though it really hasn't worked out this way, but when you have less mining power, one strategy that's been used to earn more Bitcoins with less mining power is to actually mine altcoins and then convert them to Bitcoins. The idea is that you actually, at least potentially, will earn, for instance, if you mine Doji Coins and you immediately turn the Doji Coins into altcoin or into Bitcoin, you actually made more Bitcoin than you would have had you just mined Bitcoin with the same mining equipment. That's a theory. Typically, it's either a wash or, I guess historically, Bitcoin usually still comes out a little bit ahead, but that's the idea. And then there's some multi-pool stuff with some of the mining pools that you just mine in their multi-pool, and at all times you're mining whatever the most profitable altcoin is that they mine. So you might be mining Doji, you might be mining PotCoin, you might be mining Dark Coin. There's a bunch of other coins that are popular at least. So you're mining at any point in time whichever one is the most profitable relative to Bitcoin, and then as soon as you mine it, as soon as you get your winnings, it's immediately converted to Bitcoin. Even that ends up becoming a wash, but it allows people with less horsepower to feel like they're, I guess, playing the game. So, anyways, anything else that we might want to change? What other variables go with our coin? The reward? When does the reward have? How often do we get rewards? Everything's around this idea of a reward. What about the network difficulty? Right now, with Bitcoin, it happens roughly every 2.5 weeks. Right? Is that enough? Is that too much? Is that certainly something else we can adjust?
The 2.5 weeks is based on the number of blocks.
Number of blocks, yep. Almost always math with the Bitcoin source code deals with number of blocks. Which is actually a good thing if you think about network difficulty. If you have a major jump in technology that really makes the mining world go a lot faster very quickly, you won't have to wait as long for the network to adjust. You can take a 2.5 week period that used to take 2.5 weeks if everything was about 10 minutes-ish. If all of a sudden we're mining blocks in 1 minute, you're going to do it in a tenth of the time. And at least you're able to update in a shorter physical period of time and correct the problem. The difficulty will go way up. But whatever. Even this, though, is linked to the number of coins created each block, to the rewards, and the amount of time for each block. So all these things are all linked together. You've got to find that balance between all of them, right? Anything else we can change with how Bitcoin works for our cryptocurrency?
Could you change the time it takes to guess?
Time it takes to guess. Isn't that a function of the mining equipment?
I guess I'm wondering if there would be some way where you could limit the amount of guesses per time.
Well, in a roundabout way, that's kind of what Script tried to do. The Script technology, like Litecoin and Doji Coin are based off of, their whole goal is they saw, we talked about motivation for an alt currency. They saw that the mining for Bitcoin was getting out of hand. The technology kept getting faster and faster and faster. So they didn't really fork Bitcoin. They wrote a brand new cryptocurrency kind of in light of Bitcoin, but not a direct fork of it. With one of the major goals of that currency being that it would be ASIC resistant. Application-specific integrated circuits. So it would be difficult to create specialized mining equipment specifically for Script. Now that doesn't mean it was impossible, because now we do have Script mining stuff, but the power is way, 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 way less than the equivalent on Bitcoin. But where it backfired is it's still expensive. It's actually, I would say, in my opinion, it seems like script mining equipment is actually more expensive than Bitcoin mining equipment. It's been my experience, at least. So who cares if it's actually less? The most powerful equipment is in the people who can afford to pay for it. Kind of the same problem. But that was one of the goals of script, is to make it more difficult for the mining power to get that expensive. Probably with the idea that they wanted to make it mineable, yeah, good enough, mineable by a larger group of people. You know, in the early days of Bitcoin, and there's all sorts of, we talked about this a little bit, there's all sorts of stories of people who have millions of Bitcoin. And I posted an article the other day on Facebook about the original starter of Bitcoin, the Satoshi guy, and or gal, whoever it is, it's an anonymous person, but they hold roughly 10% of all Bitcoins that are in existence. This one account or this one wallet associated with that account. Yet nothing's been spent. Or very, very little. Small little expenditures are on the blockchain from when they were testing the source code for Bitcoin. Because that's something else we need to discuss, and that's really that idea of the Genesis block. Bitcoin really has to be a live testing thing. So before they released it to the world, the blockchain existed in a little tiny version, right? And it kind of grew, and we have the early version of that blockchain. We can see the first several transactions, including the Genesis block, which was the first transaction. And we'll talk about that here in a minute or at the beginning of next class. But, in any case, one concern they have with one person having 10% of all the Bitcoins that have ever existed is that what happens if that one person starts selling off those Bitcoins? I think they use the example, I think his, was it 1 million? It's something like his current, if he converted to US dollars, it's worth about $300 million-ish, give or take. Enough for a boat, I guess. So if he decided to cash out today, he could pocket $300 million. But what would probably happen? If you have 1 million Bitcoins, it's going to be a little difficult to move 1 million Bitcoins. You might be able to move 1,000 of them at current market value, just using numbers. But eventually, when people start seeing a lot of Bitcoins being liquidated, or a lot of them moving towards some of the central repositories like CoinDesk and stuff like that, so being liquidated, it is probably going to drive the price of Bitcoin down. Something else the article talked about is how that person who has 1 million Bitcoins could also manipulate the market by driving it up. Create transactions based on the value of the coin that make the coin feel rarer than it was. So for instance, the person who owns that account could send 50% of their coins, so 500,000 coins, to a non-spendable Bitcoin address, essentially deleting those coins from the economy. So they have 500,000 coins deleted from the economy. All of a sudden, the perception is Bitcoins are now a little bit rarer than they were before. And since Bitcoin operates on such kind of a hair trigger with motions and shoots, we see days where it's up $200 and then down $220 the next day. It's all over the place. So since it's like that, you could say we could manipulate the price of Bitcoin. I can't move 1 million Bitcoins, but I'd have a better chance of moving 500,000. But what if you took 900,000 Bitcoins and remove them from the market in a noticeable way, public way? He might then be able to move 100,000 Bitcoins out of the market at tenfold what they're currently worth. Something like that, if he can exaggerate the price of Bitcoins, inflate the price of Bitcoins. But that's the same thing as that's not a weakness of Bitcoin. If Bill Gates decided that he wanted to disrupt the U.S. economy by moving, a lot of his $60 billion, which could also buy a boat, by the way, you'd be all right. I'm just saying you'd be okay. I don't think you would.
You think so?
What does it say? The grass is not always greener on the other side. I think with
That money you can buy
Just, that kind of money, just paint the grass. Just have a constant dude spray painting the grass. I think there's a lot of headaches. I don't think. I know from experience. There's a lot of headaches that comes from wealth. It's not all it's cracked up to be. Stay poor for as long as you can. It's better.
Trust me, Corey's gonna make sure of that.
Well, when you come out, what are you gonna have? $50,000 or $60,000 in loans? It's like that's nothing.
That's nothing.
In the big scheme of things, that's nothing. You're not even gonna notice. You go out and get your $60,000 or $70,000 a year job. You're not gonna notice the $300 a month payment. Not a big deal. Definitely worth it in the end.
I'm not saying it's not worth it. I'm just saying.
Just saying you want to be Bill Gates for a short period of time to pay off your loan and buy a boat. Then go back under the radar. So just real quick, just so we have the slide created for this. So we have this idea of the Genesis block. So what is the Genesis block? It's the initial block added to the blockchain. Now, if we think about the blockchain as a data structure, think about the blockchain as a data structure similar to like a tree data structure. The blockchain data structure needs to be at least one root block. It's like a tree has to be a single root node. Okay, you can't have the blockchain without at least one block. Then it's nothing. That makes sense? Then we add on to that single block. All right, so we'll talk more about this next time. If you're traveling for Thanksgiving, travel safe. Otherwise, I'll see everybody on Monday.